Your world is waiting, but first you have to access it. Welcome to the Joshua Roy Show. We don't do fluff, we do freedom. Real talk on mindset, cutting edge coaching techniques, and the hidden frameworks for lasting change. If you're ready to move from being stuck to becoming the architect of your life, you're ready for this. Hit subscribe. Let's get to work. Good morning. The date is now the 6th of February 2026. Time is now 6 a.m. And I want to talk for a moment about this idea of pattern mastery. Now, this is something that came up in day one of Tony Robbins' Time to Rise. That's the free training that he put on this year. And I just wanted to talk briefly about this idea of patterns. And he introduced three ideas, and I just want to talk about these three briefly and just discuss the ideas behind each. And hopefully this will be beneficial for you, beneficial for me also, a recap of what we learned during the training. And it's a good idea to go over these ideas, whether you speak them out verbally or just think about them in your mind, or whether you journal and write things down. It's a good idea to revisit the trainings. If you don't, it's as if the information is falling on deaf ears. Now, a lot was covered in this summit, and there's so much that we can unpack. If we were to unpack each and every component of the entire 3-day summit, it'd take us a number of days to do so. But I just want to look at this one concept of patterns. And the first idea, or the first skill around patterns, is pattern recognition. You've got to recognize the patterns that are happening in your life. Now, I know this is the same as the healing process. It's actually the same step. When somebody wants to heal, when somebody wants to change, then what we do is we find out, we recognize what the problem initially is so that we can then go ahead and create something different, something new. And so recognition is always first. And it's no different when it comes to patterns in our life. And this is a pattern for an individual, a pattern for a business or a company, a pattern for a relationship. These are patterns, and this can be applied to everything and every area and aspect of life. We are products of our environment, and we're also products of the patterns that we run each day. Dr. Joe Dispenza has a book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And what he suggests in this book is that we are living out our lives on autopilot. So we're not actually learning day to day. We're not actually growing or evolving if we just leave our mind alone. If we just coast through life, then that's not going to create change. So he said one of the most difficult habits that you and I have to break is the habit of being ourselves. If you want a different result, then you've got to stop being you and start living into a new identity. And that's what it's all about. So the first thing is the recognition that the patterns in our life, and let's talk about individual patterns. Let's first talk about mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. And so let's look at our physical patterns. So the physical patterns in our life might be our exercise program. That's a physical pattern. Another physical pattern in our life might be what we do in our spare time, our hobbies, our interests, what we're drawn to. Other physical patterns are the way we get to work, the way we get home. And there's patterns all around that, like what we do during that time. Are we preparing for work? Are we doing personal development? Or are we just staring blankly out the window? Well, what are we doing as we travel to and from work? So there's physical patterns all through our life. Now, physical patterns can also include our rest. Are we getting enough rest? Are we doing any sort of routine, like a morning routine? Incantations, excitement, emotional stretching, these are all parts of my routine. So what are you doing physically to move your life forward? And so the physical patterns are what we do physically, and not just what we do once in a while, but what we do consistently. A pattern is developed through consistent, ongoing behavior. And so it's not what you do once in a while, it's what you do consistently that counts most. So let's think about, first of all, the patterns, and we recognize what current patterns we're running. So if we're a couch potato, if we're not exercising, if we're eating the wrong foods, if we're not physically looking after our body the way that we should, then we could say that we're not doing so well in this area, so there might need to be some adjustment. So we recognize what's happening at the moment. We see life as it really is. Not better than it is, but as it is. We take an honest appraisal of ourselves, of our life, and of the physical reality we live in and the physical patterns we run in our life or the physical patterns we don't run. And it's not about hoping, wishing, or dreaming. It's about being realistic and authentic as we recognize it. So that's pattern recognition as far as physical health. Now we can move into the next one, which is mental. Well, what are you doing mentally? Is your mind sharp? Are you alert? Are you practicing things in your mind? You know, there was times where I was working as a police officer. I worked in a watch house, and I worked out at a place called Ipswich, Australia. And out at Ipswich, I would go to the courtroom, and sometimes I would sit in court while a prisoner was in the dock, and the magistrate, the lawyer, and also the police prosecutor would discuss what was going to happen with the particular prisoner. They'd discuss the matter, the case at hand, and they'd look for a solution. Now, sometimes these were quite lengthy. They would go on for a period of time. And I would listen for a while, but if I found my mind wandering, I would turn my attention to development, personal development. Now, the reason I could do this and get away with it was the prisoner was in a dock. They were secure. There was no way that they could escape from that dock. And so I was basically just there and just basically sitting there waiting for the court matter to finish so that I would know when to take the prisoner out of the dock and back down to the watch house. And that's the time where I had to be alert. That's the time that I had to be switched on. However, when I was sitting in the courtroom, I could relax a little bit. And when I relaxed physically, I could also relax my mind, and I could do other things with my mind. And so here I was at that time, sitting there, listening to the magistrate drone on, listening to the lawyers drone on, and a lot of the talk was monotone. Some of it was very interesting, some of it not very interesting at all, especially when you start hearing it day after day on an ongoing basis. It becomes a little bit boring. And so what I did was I would use the time to practice my memory pegs and to work on different NLP techniques in my mind, in my imagination, using things like the swish pattern and other techniques. And so here I am using my mind in a productive way in a situation where I would otherwise be bored. Now, I couldn't sit there and read a book. That would be a little bit rude. And I don't think the magistrate would have appreciated that. I don't know if it would have been contempt of court or seen that way, but the magistrate would not have been happy with it. And yet, my imagination could run wild. I could use my imagination and my mental exertion and direct that mental exertion in any direction I chose. And I chose to do memory pegs, and I chose to use my mind to think about the courses that I was creating, the content that I would deliver, and the way that I would help touch, move, and inspire people and move them forward in their lives. So the second is mental. The first thing we need to do is recognize what you're doing mentally. Are you wasting time? Do you scroll endlessly on Facebook or Instagram? What are you doing with your mind? Are you keeping it sharp and alert? Or are you allowing your mind to wander into activities that you don't actually want, that aren't going to benefit you in the long term? And so now we recognize what we're doing with our mind. The third one is emotional. Emotional health. What are you doing about your emotions? First of all, we need to recognize, are you living in reaction in your life, or are you living with volition? You know, a lot of the training that I do around personal development and the courses that I share in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, the fundamental basis of it is that I teach people to no longer live in reaction, because that's what most people do. Most people live in reaction emotionally to whatever situations or circumstances or events occur around them. And so we're constantly in reaction mode. Something bad happens, we feel bad. Something good happens, we feel good. Somebody gives us praise, we feel happy, we feel good. Somebody criticizes us, we feel bad. And so quite often what we do is we reflect what other people are doing and saying, and we reflect our environment. Now, what the emotional master does is they live with, as I mentioned before, volition, meaning that instead of reacting emotionally, they act emotionally. Instead of getting upset, they pick and choose a new path to take. And I tell you what, this is such an empowering way of living life. And what you do is when anything positive comes your way, you say thank you. Something positive comes, a compliment, say thank you. When something negative comes your way, you say thank you. Now, that doesn't make sense to a lot of people because their usual reaction is to get offended. Their usual reaction might be to fight back. Their usual reaction might be to become critical of the other person who's just criticized them. But really, there's nothing learnt there, and we end up just fighting with each other. Nothing gets resolved. Nothing gets fixed. And so if you can realize that a person may offend you for a couple of reasons. A person may say something negative about you for just a couple of reasons. One, they're trying to build themselves up. There's an old saying that says that if I blow out your candle, mine shines more brightly. And so one reason why people criticize others is because of a feeling of inadequacy that they're carrying around with them, and a way that they feel like they can move from that or shift from that is by putting another person down. And so by putting another person down, they elevate themselves, either inadvertently or even directly in their own mind, in their own imagination. Now, a person may not realize they're doing this and may not be doing this intentionally. This could be a pattern of behavior that's been with them throughout their life. Maybe it developed in childhood, and the imprint period, the first 7 years of life, and has moved throughout their life. Just so you're aware, in psychology, there are 3 periods that we talk about. First, the imprint, 1 to 7. Next is the mentoring period, 7 to about 14. And beyond that, we're looking at the socialization period. And these are the 3 stages that psychologists say that each of us go through. And quite often when there's a challenge in someone's life, it stems from their childhood and the imprint period, the first 7 years of life. It has such a powerful impact on your life in the here and now, and also throughout a person's life. And so the work that I do as well with NLP is about healing the past. So what we want to do is do the emotional clearing past so that your past no longer dictates your responses and how you react in life. And so to become an emotional master means that instead of reacting, you act. Instead of reacting adversely or negatively, you always find a way to act in a positive, empowering way. And that's what it's all about. So the emotional master acts in a positive way. But what we're going to do is recognize where we currently are. And if you find yourself wearing your heart on your sleeve, if you find yourself drifting and being pushed around by criticism, by negative self-talk, by things that other people do and say, if you find that affects your confidence in the here and now, then you might want to consider going on an NLP and self-development journey to get the skills that you need to create change. So let's furthermore have a look at pattern recognition in the next stage, which is the spiritual stage of our life. Now, when we look at spirituality, a lot of people tend to think religion. When I say spirituality, I'm not talking religion necessarily. Now, I can be, and for some people that is right and that applies perfectly for them and their situation. For others, though, we may look at direction and purpose in life. What is your direction? What is your purpose? Do you have a clear focus for your life? And what we find is we need to recognize the patterns that are currently running in our spiritual world. So are we feeling a closeness to God, the universe, our higher self? Are we feeling an affinity to nature? Are we feeling like we're directed and guided through life? Are we receiving promptings? Are we receiving guidance from an external source? Are we allowing grace to fill our lives and fill our hearts and move us forward? So these ideas we look at. So when we talk about direction and purpose, do you have a direction? What do you want? What do you really want? Does that purpose help others? Is it self-serving or is it others serving? And I tell you what, those that self-serve will only go so far. It's those that want to serve and help others that end up finding their way through, you could say, the midst of darkness and back into the light. That's what we want. We want to be able to move forward consistently, and the way to do that is to do more for others, add value, add more value to others than maybe you ever dreamed of or you ever thought possible. So this idea of giving and serving and loving and lifting. So pattern recognition is step number one. We need to recognize the different patterns in our life. Now, we've also got patterns in relationships, and certainly I could talk about pattern recognition for another hour. It would be very, very simple to talk about because we all run by patterns. And we're going to realize this, that that's what we are. And our mind does this to preserve energy. So the first time you do anything, it's very difficult. You've got to think about all the moving parts, and think about driving a car, for example. In NLP, we talk about 4 levels of competence. The first level is unconscious incompetence. You don't even know how incompetent you are. That's before you learn how to drive, let's say, a stick shift car. So before you learn how to drive, you don't know how to drive. You've seen people drive, but that's it. You haven't experienced for yourself. So what happens is one day you sit in the driver's seat, and maybe you've got your learners, your provisional license, and you start driving. Now you're getting the experience of driving. Now you find out how bad you really are. Like you find out that you didn't change gears on time, you cut that corner a bit close, you didn't give enough space there, maybe you hit something, maybe there was an accident. So you start to find out about your own inadequacy. We become consciously incompetent. We understand that we're not competent. Now what happens is with practice and with work and with driving regularly, we get better. That's what happens. That's the nature of the beast. We improve our skills through doing things. Through the activity of driving, you become a better driver. Now, after driving for, let's say, 100 hours, you're very proficient with your driving. You turn corners well, you signal at the right time, your brake, your clutch work, everything's working perfectly. So what happens is, as we get through that work and that effort and that struggle, we go to conscious competence, where we're actually focusing on learning the skill, and then we move after 100 or 1,000 hours into unconscious competence. And you'll know when you've reached unconscious competence when you go for a drive and then you look around when you get there and wonder how you got there, because your mind was busy doing something else. Now, the reason the mind could be busy doing something else is because you've learnt the behavior so well that it's become a habit or a pattern of your life. And so once it becomes a pattern or a habit, then you no longer need to use mental exertion in that activity. What happens is you go into autopilot. You just drive. The first time you jumped into a car, you had to look at the mirror, you had to work out where your feet were, you had to think about a whole bunch of different considerations. Is my seatbelt on? Look at the rear vision mirror, look at the side mirror, put the indicator on, change lanes, change gears. There's so many things to think about, whereas eventually you just drive. Now, this is how patterns are created in our life. And some of these patterns are serving you and they are good. And others are not serving you, and you might want to adjust it. And that's why we recognize the patterns. We recognize what's working in your life, what's working in the different areas of your life, and then we look at the next step, which is pattern utilization. So pattern utilization is an interesting one. Here's where we copy whatever works. Now, it's been said that the best way to learn anything is through mentoring. Find someone who's doing the activity that you want to do, copy them, mimic them, do what they do, take on what it is that they do, what they say, and how they conduct business. Do what they do, and you'll have the success that they have. It really is quite simple when you think about it. And what you're doing is you're looking at another person, a mentor, and you're working out what patterns they run in their life. And if you can utilize the same patterns in your life, then you can achieve and have results and have success like they have had. Now, it really is quite simple. You've got to look into it. You've got to be willing and open to learn, to recognize, and to utilize those patterns. And so pattern utilization is, well, let's keep the patterns in my own life that are good. Let's utilize those. Let's look for patterns in other people's lives that are good, that are getting them success, if that's what you want. If you're success driven, then go in that direction. If you're happiness driven, then go in that direction. But you've got to look for those patterns of behavior that work, and then we utilize them. We utilize them by turning them into patterns for our own life. And to the extent that we do that, life starts moving forward more abundantly, more profoundly than ever before. So the last one is pattern creation. Now, this is where you look at being potentially a pioneer. You see, in the first two patterns, the first one particularly, you're just taking a good look and an appraisal of what you're currently doing, what others are currently doing. You're recognizing patterns. The next one is utilizing patterns, is saying, if it works for Joe, maybe it'll work for me. If it works for Sally, then if I apply that same principle and start doing that, then I can get the results. And it's been said that success does leave clues. So when you look at somebody who's highly successful, monetarily, in love, in relationships, they're successful in the way their mind works. They're very sharp, very articulate. They're a great author. Whatever the case may be, you're looking for the patterns that led to that. What does this person do, or has this person done in order to advance themselves in that way? And so we look at somebody like The Rock, and we see that he's not only a bodybuilder, but also an actor. He followed in the footsteps of, let's say, Arnold Schwarzenegger. If you remember years ago, Arnold Schwarzenegger became Mr. Universe several times. At the same time, he was moving into his acting career. And then he used those same principles to move into being a governor and a movie star and all those sorts of things. So he's somebody who has been a great example of success. If that's what you want, then what you do is you model Arnold Schwarzenegger. And that looks like what The Rock has done. So The Rock started off as a bodybuilder, as a wrestler. The Rock then has moved into acting, which is at now. I don't know whether he'll become a politician. But what you're looking at is you're looking for examples of somebody else to follow. And then if The Rock puts in the same amount of effort and training as Arnold Schwarzenegger, then it's likely that he'll get similar or the same results. And that's what we're seeing there. And so for you find yourself a mentor. You find someone who's a bit further on the journey than you are. Then you model that person. You look for the patterns. You recognize what patterns there are in your life that are destructive, and you swap them out and find yourself a mentor so that you can utilize the patterns that mentor utilizes in order to help you get the results that you want. This is really quite simple, yet it's profound in its implications. And it's also very profound when we start applying these principles into our own lives. So the last one, pattern creation. So this is where we become innovative. And we've got to continue to do this because whilst it's good to follow other people's success, what can happen is the more people that follow somebody else, the more we create what's called a red ocean. So think about there's two concepts. One is a red ocean, one is a green ocean. And a red ocean is when an idea comes out, then everybody jumps on the bandwagon. Everybody's doing that idea. Everybody's doing that thing. What happens is these different companies or businesses can go to war with each other. Now, not a physical war, but it's more behind the scenes war. It's more a mental and economic war that they wage with each other. And so you've got this war, this struggle to take the lion's share of the market. And the challenge is, well, how do we do that? How do we create that? How do we get and keep that number one position with this thing? And so that's what business is all about. Now, what happens is when too many people start doing the same thing, then it becomes what's called a red ocean. And this is where we need innovation, because what you might need to do is to develop something new, something different. And as you develop something new or something different, or even go into a specific niche, then what you do is you create your own blue ocean. And that's how you can have success. So the idea is you find somebody successful, you look at the patterns they're using and running, you recognize them, then you utilize them for yourself, And then also, if success starts to wane, then you've got to look at, well, what do I need to do in an innovative way to create something new, interesting, that's going to keep me moving forward at an accelerated rate. So that's pattern mastery. And so this was shared at the summit. It's something that I've been thinking about, the different patterns in my life, the different patterns that serve me, those that don't, those that I want to eliminate, and also pattern utilization, making sure that I adopt new patterns that I see from others. And this is why this is why I jump onto YouTube and the different places like Instagram. I'm looking for my Dream 100. I'm looking for people that I can emulate. I'm looking for people that I can be more like. And by doing that, by utilizing that skill, I am able to become more successful because I now have a coach, a mentor, a trainer, someone that I can follow that can give me ideas of what I should be doing. And so recognize that this is a way to move forward. So pattern recognition, pattern utilization, pattern creation, get out there, be innovative, create something new, make your own blue ocean, and get to work. So I just want to finish with this idea that your commitment to yourself should be to discover who you really are. Unlock your incredible self and unleash that on the world. Your commitment to yourself should be to discover who you really are. Unlock your incredible self and unleash that on the world. So thanks for being here today. Thanks for spending some time with me, and I look forward to seeing you at the next episode.